All right, so it's time to talk about what I'm going to be doing as far as the proton gun's concerned. I've got my reference pictures laid out there, and there's a number of different variations in this sort of stuff. As I said in the last video, this is pretty much a build unto itself, and that's pretty much the way I'm going to be tackling it. The principle basically is the same as what I've done in the pack, just in a much smaller scale. These are the printouts that came along with the pack instructions that I used in the beginning of the build. The difference with these is that they're not hyper detailed in terms of the breakdown of it. It's just been done as a singular piece sort of thing with that top side bottom sort of referencing, and that's as much detail as they've gone into it. There is a measurement here that lays out the length that gives me some reference to work with, but beyond that, that's as much as the breakdown that they've done with it. So that's not super helpful when it comes to the individual component pieces. From there, the other references that you can see here relate to a number of different versions, some going back to the original pieces used in the first and second films. Other pieces are taken from either the Hasbro version or different copies that other people have done. The reference pictures that you can see in this one are taken from one of the original packs from the second film, and the one thing that's quite good with these ones is that they've included some tape measurements in there as well that I can reference. So where I've got to so far in terms of the parts is concerned is obviously we have the kit that has to be fitted into this. Up to this point, I've made up the basis of all the necessary pieces to sort of assemble together, but I haven't put them together in a final box configuration yet because I want to know where everything's going to go. The other thing to consider with this is the pop-out piece on the tip of the gun, and that is something that I do want to include into this setup as well. The rear handle that the hose runs out of is a fixed handle. It doesn't really move at all. And the forward handle has a piece that allows the barrel to rotate 90 degrees, and then the pop-out barrel is contained inside that. These are all the bits that I've got to get put together, and in doing that I still need to make sure that I've got enough room for the electronic components and that pop-out mechanism. There's a couple of videos out there that talk about the pop-out mechanism, and there's 3D printed versions that you can get that have a setup inside it. I'm pretty well going to be deferring to my own idea to maximize the space inside the box, but that's probably not something that I'm going to be tackling in this video. I just need to be conscious of it in terms of where I'm making space available as I start to put things in. I've got the little wooden piece that I've cut out there as a template for the electronics box, and again I'll be using that as reference like I did in the pack to make sure everything aligns up properly. My greatest degree of working space, as far as I can tell, is sort of contained within this area below that front handle section, and I think that's pretty much the way that we're going to be going in terms of mounting locations. I've got about 3.5 to 4 centimeters of working space there that I can fit the electronics cluster in, and hopefully that setup will keep away from anything else I'm likely to have in there. The other thing I've obviously got to do is work out where all the holes need to be for the light mountings and switch mountings, and there's also some venting pieces that have to be cut in here as well as working out where the permanently attached pieces are going to be and where the removable component pieces are going to be in terms of long-term maintenance or future access. I think I'm going to be leaving the base and the sides off initially until I've worked out where all these holes need to be. That side piece on its own, apart from one control knob, doesn't seem to have any sort of holes cut into it, so that can pretty much be set aside and sort of attached, not so much at the last minute, but certainly not until I really need to. At the moment, I think having it put on there is pretty much just going to make things more difficult in terms of getting in the way in terms of where I'm working out the electronics. And I think the base piece is going to end up being the removable component piece that I use in terms of future access. In the reference photos that I've got, there are some sort of Allen key screws that do go along the bottom here, and it just seems logical to actually utilize those as a real world access point. Just put the electronics away for safety's sake for now. This is the one that's going to be the fixed handle. This is a piece of aluminium tubing, and then I've done a bevel cut at that end to allow for easy access for the wiring. And when the handle is set straight, that bevel cut is a little offset, which makes it a little easier once again. So that's going to be a permanently fixed in piece. And then I'll do that same artificial weld sort of idea around here that I've done previously. But again, before I get too carried away with that, I think we are going to work out the rest of these cutout slots and stuff, so that I know that they aren't going to be getting in the way of anything I am going to be mounting permanently. I've tried to print these pictures out so that they're as close to the same scale that I'm working with, and that just gives me a bit more reference in terms of the positioning of these features as well. This is where it can be really easy to sort of fall into that analysis paralysis and get really stuck on what we're doing, because looking at some of this imagery It's a little bit hard because you've got the parallax of the way the photo's been taken, so you can't always tell. In some instances, it sort of shows the rough centering of the little knob on top there to be virtually in the center. In other photos, it sort of shows it to be closer to one side or the other. And I'm quite sure there's people out there that have gone and sort of measured this sort of stuff to the millimeter. I'm pretty much sort of going by feel on what looks right. So in the end, I've basically just got to sort of bite the bullet and make a decision in terms of where this sort of stuff's going to be placed. And that's what I'm doing as far as reference marks are concerned as I work. Once I sort of nail that down and I'm pretty much happy with it, I can pretty much use that as a reference mark and then measure off that to work out where the other pieces are going to go. So again, I'm using visual reference here. I'm referencing roughly the lines of the edge of the slots that line up there in relation to where they sit into this handle, which is the same sort of thing I've drawn there. Spacing is that the first slot is slightly further forward, the last slot is, there's a larger gap here. Obviously the gaps between them are fairly even, and then working out this distance here, I feel like that's a bit wide at the moment, so we're probably going to be coming down to about there.
One eternity later.
Okay. Time to make some mess. Here's a tip for you. If you want to use a drill kind of like a milling piece, you don't want to flog out the opposite side. If you put the drill piece in backwards, that will give you a section that won't cut as opposed to a section that will cut, which means you can go into that hole and not flog out the back side, but flog out the front side. As I'm carving in these slot pieces, I've made myself up a little template piece that'll act as a size guide to make sure that they're all exactly the same size. So when I get to the point that that first one sort of straight and true and fits that in a perfectly neat fit, it's getting close, it's not quite there yet. But once that's right, I can then use that as a reference for the next one, so that it maintains those slots all in exactly the same size. Also going to make up a little frame piece to go around that as well. So that's the complicated ones cut out. The rest of these holes, I'm not going to do anything to enlarge them at the moment until I've got the exact light covers and stuff that I need. So this is a good example of why I'm glad I haven't put the handle on yet, because as that comes through there, that is going to sort of block that vent a little bit. And there's supposed to be a light that goes underneath there, so that's definitely going to get in the way of that. So I've just put a texture mark there, and I'm going to cut out a section of that handle as well before it's permanently attached, so that it won't block any of the lighting that I need to install. Alright, so that's that bit cut out better. You can see that that now clears that vent for where the lighting and stuff's going to go, and there's going to be plenty of room to do that. I've also started to put in some of that epoxy putty to hold everything in place, so that that will be ready for the permanent fixture of that. This video is going up a bit late because during the editing of this video I've actually taken another trip down to Tasmania and done some work down there for my sister, as well as sort of doing some building work for my son for some things that he's doing in his life. So apologies for this video going up a bit later than normal. In the next video I'm going to be working out the extendable barrel piece. I've managed to find a piece of acrylic in the right size. It doesn't have any of the frosted slots cut into it yet, but that's pretty much the right size I needed to get it to work. I've already been thinking about the ejection system to make it operate, in terms of how it's going to be spring loaded and all that sort of stuff. And I'll also be covering some other unexpected components that have arrived. But anyway guys, that'll be the update for this time. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you next time.